Hello and welcome to the Sideline Live podcast. My name is Orla Keeling and I am the host of the podcast, where every week we bring you a brand new episode with guests ranging from Olympic champions to local heroes, coaches, support staff and anybody involved in the world of sport. Each week we will dive into different topics, including current affairs in sport, identity, skill, mindset, coaching, and also shine a light on those flying under the radar. So tune in every week for brand new episodes, new stories, and new insights you've never heard before. Okay, delighted to be joined by Austin O'Malley in definitely the most fancy room and hotel I've been doing an interview in. Austin, thanks for having me and for joining me today.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. I didn't want to let you down now, so I'm all about the environment. So the environment should match the clientele, I always say. So more than happy to provide this.
Very good. I was going through kind of where to start and I suppose the intro, and the most recent probably title you have is All-Ireland winning manager with Cuala. Has that got old?
No, it hasn't got old. Certainly, it's a nice one. It was obviously an incredible year. It's been an incredible journey, I suppose. Kind of a 3-year build. I've done 3 years there, so it was really nice to, I suppose, cap it off with an All-Ireland win. Like obviously, the last year was, it was quite a protracted or long season. You're ending up, the 20th of January we won it, and you're probably drilling since the previous kind of into November, so you're talking 14, 15 months. A lot of challenge in it. Obviously it was a breakthrough year, and a lot of milestones hit along the way in terms of, I suppose, getting over that first hurdle of becoming Dublin champions for the first time. And I suppose the refocus to try and give Leinster a crack. When you do that, then it's another sort of recalibration. You have Christmas in the middle of that, and then to go on and hold yourself steady and jump the final hurdle. So an incredible year, an incredible challenging year from a coaching perspective and all the bits that come with it, but hugely rewarding. And just so proud of the group, I suppose, and the club as well. I suppose for even giving me the opportunity to be there as a coach.
I know you stepped down there in kind of February time. Do you miss being part of a group like that level of performance that you would have been operating at?
Yeah, absolutely. You completely miss the group and the group dynamic, I suppose. You become very, very close. You build some really, really deep relationships and connections throughout the 3 years. So you definitely miss that. Yeah, there's definitely an element of that. Stepped away, obviously, just in terms of had a lot of things on with regard to work, and I'm a young family as well, so a little guy came along in the middle of all that as well, so he's just 18 months now as well, so he was obviously trying to give back a little bit there as well, but you do miss definitely the connection, and I suppose you step out and then you try, and there's obviously the perspective, which I believe in wholeheartedly as a coach, that there has to be a period for regeneration and recovery as well yourself in terms of managing your energy, and I'm a big believer in that. I'd be a big advocate of that, so I think that was really important for me as well, to re-energize myself and your own health and well-being. The coaching, with coaching, it's a game of energy and you give out quite a lot, so you have to be cognizant of that as well in terms of building yourself back up again before you go again. That
was actually something I heard in an interview, I forget who it was, and they said coaching is very much you're on all the time and you're just giving the energy, and while it's great to be part of a group, I've been there once or twice when you've given everything and you have to keep going, but that's hard. It's something that trying to manage yourself, as you say, because you're trying to give everyone else energy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In coaching, it's similar to teaching in a lot of ways. I think, if you ever ask a young teacher in their first year or two, they'll tell you, my God, I'm mentally drained. When 3:30 comes, I go home and I'm ready to fall asleep. So coaching is very much like that. You give out huge energy, huge mental energy, huge physical energy, emotional energy, and certainly spiritual as well. If you're really dialed in, I think so. All those pillars are being drained and you're giving them out, and it's a huge part of it. I think there are certainly nights that you arrive like any player, that you put your hand on the door of the car to get out, and you're saying to yourself, where am I actually going to get the energy tonight to do this? But those are the moments that I suppose you go back to your coach and why, and your purpose around why you want to do something, and that's the thing that gets you through maybe. But I've often said, you hit those moments throughout a year, you know, and you often, you know, when you come back into the car that night, like you're completely re-energized because you've fed off the group, even though you've given energy, but you've fed off the group as well. And that's a really special place as well. So big part of coaching is energy management and resilience, and having to push yourself through sessions as well, just like the players.
You had quite a sustained playing career as well, also at intercounty level with Wicklow and Mayo. How early did you realise you were going to go into management?
I think probably when I was finishing up. I've always loved coaching, I suppose, from a young age. Well, from a young age, I've been really fascinated. I suppose I always was fascinated with just, you know, the conditioning side, you know, the physiology and the conditioning side of coaching and playing, and it was something that I would have been, you know, very, very passionate about growing up. So I was always, even when I was, you know, maybe 19 or 20 or 21 in my home club in Louisburg, I used to often take sessions, and you know, if the manager was away, he'd say, "Can you step in?" So always had a love for it like that, and that was, you know, fostered, I suppose, throughout the years. Then, and I was teaching for 12 years before I stepped into performance coaching. So I would have coached a lot through the school system here in Dublin as well, and then went on into to coaching UCD. I had freshers, lucky enough to have a great freshers team there. We won an All Ireland Fresher League, and then I was with the inters and the juniors in UCD as well, and it was a brilliant experience. We won an All Ireland in both of those as well, so some great experiences in that, and that really whet the appetite, I suppose. And I was lucky enough then to, off the back of that, to do a little bit with Cuala in a part-time basis, a number of years ago before I actually went back in as manager. So it was probably always in the back of my mind, something I was passionate about, and when my playing career was coming to an end, it was probably an easy enough transition, yeah.
Throughout your playing career, you were exposed to really excellent managers. Give us an insight into your experience there.
Yeah, I was really, really lucky when I often think back in terms of the calibre of the managers that I served under. You know, when you think of, I suppose, the likes of John O'Mahony, John Maughan, Mickey Moran, Mick O'Dwyer. I had Davy Billings in UCD. I spent a couple of years in Vincent's as well, where I got access to Micky Whelan and those. So, just an incredible, kind of cachet of wisdom and knowledge that I suppose, that you had access to, that was in front of you and that you were picking up from. And I also had some great club managers. I mean, one of the most profound guys that probably had an impact on me was my club manager at home. I think Frank Noon at the start, when just before, around the time I was probably kind of breaking in with Mayo. He really believed in me, and he was a former Mayo player. He played for a long time with Mayo, and he really took me on a journey and got the best out of me in a club season where we won an intermediate with the club, and that probably gave me the platform to go on to play intercounty and that. But all of those characters, there was so much that when I look back now, that I probably, by virtue of osmosis, I was just drawn in and probably, leveraged off that when I stepped into management myself then.
Is there any point where you've been managing or coaching and you said, geez, that's exactly what the lads would have done? Or was there anything you've just realised, God, that's exactly what I've learned from them? Because the list of names you've given there, they're kind of creme de la creme of county management. Yeah,
I think there is, probably there are moments definitely where it's punctuated. I think maybe, just even Mick O'Dwyer, I was so lucky to have him 2 years in Wicklow, and, he was just his man management and his ability to be always light-hearted and to treat things, not to make a major fuss out of things, but to deal with it in a way that, he was still positioning it in terms of maybe the right behaviour or so on, but the ability to be light-hearted about it or to catch a situation maybe before it took off and that. So there was definitely moments like that. I think from John O'Mahony's perspective, the things I would have picked up there would be just maybe attention to detail, and thinking outside of the box, without a doubt. And I suppose the likes of John Maughan, just the motivational factor. He's obviously a really, really great motivational guy in terms of a dressing room and that. So there's so much, that you're just probably plucking. And you're right, sometimes you just look back and you think, God, how did I actually come up with that? And you probably have executed it before you said, oh God, that's probably where I learned that.
In terms of, if you were to teleport back in time to your playing career, is there anything you've learned as a management that you would have really loved to have known as a player and think would have brought you on even more?
Yeah, I think for me, definitely the mindset piece, I think, would be a big thing for me. Just an understanding the value of really managing your mindset when you're a player, having somebody as a mentor or having somebody that you could go to. I probably came up through an era where we had great managers and everything, but at the time there probably wasn't the same level of resources around us as there are players now. So I think that bit certainly, and being able to manage your mindset a little bit better and maybe not getting caught up in a lot of the external kind of noises that are around when you're playing inter-county football and so on that can kind of come in on top of you. So I think that definitely would be something that I would have looked back on and said, you know, if I had my time back, that's something that I potentially would have invested more in or certainly looked at.
Is the mindset piece more from being more selfish in your own preparation and performance? Or is it something else?
I actually think maybe on the contrary. I think looking back maybe, you know, we came up, or I certainly played in an era where I think I was definitely all in, and maybe too much so to some respects, in that you know, I've often thought maybe I left some of my best performances on gym floors because it was just more, push, where I probably didn't understand the value of recovery to the point that I do now, but also mental recovery in terms of being able to switch off and not maybe, you know, overthinking things, or not thinking that every day of every hour you have to be locked in, you know. And now that I understand, I suppose, the whole concept of energy management, particularly managing your mental and emotional energy, it's a huge thing. So I think that would probably be a big learning from me. And when I look back, and it's probably something I'm really cognizant of when you're managing players as well, you know, you want everybody to be driven, you want everybody to be locked in, but you have to realise as well that there's, you know, so much more going on in someone's life. And that they need to be able to step off as well. So the whole idea of recovery and regeneration, huge, I think, at all levels, physical and mental.
Do you think that's a sign, though, of the evolution of GAA? Like, we look back to the mid-noughties, where it was kind of a bit of strength and conditioning, then the 10s, where everyone was getting really kind of strong and big, and then, you know, coming into this stage now where we've got everyone's talking about sleep and recovery boots and all these things, and speed, I think, will be the next huge evolution. What do you think that's actually the evolution of Gaelic games that we're now looking at mindset, or were people actually looking at it back then? Yeah,
I think it is the evolution without a doubt, and I think there's probably more, people are leaning more into it in terms of that there's more knowledge, there's more really, there are a lot more very good sports psychologists around, there's a lot more infrastructure put around guys and girls, there's a lot more research and studies done as well, so you can lean into that, whereas it was, you know, probably when we were back, you know, at the time, you know, there was definitely maybe even a certain taboo around it that you know, if you access that stuff, that you were a little bit mentally weak, like, whereas like it was an actual strength that you were delving into that stuff, or certainly if you were employing it, or, you know, in the shadows with it, you weren't telling anybody that you were doing it or so on. So it was more kind of closed that, and I think the whole, you know, that profession has opened up and we can see the benefits of it, and it's obviously evidence-based now as well in terms of great research done. And when you look at it, you know, when you raise up your eyes and look across at international athletes and the resources that they're being put around those, it's a mainstay.
When you mentioned the noise or the distractions outside of being an elite athlete or high potential or in business or anything, what advice do you give people on managing the noise outside of themselves?
Yeah, look, and there is more and more of it now, because obviously there are more tentacles and more eyes on the game, and there are more facets for the game to be analysed and projected. So once upon a time, the game was played, you know, it made a headline maybe on the Monday or so on, but now you have obviously a lot more, you know, narratives being spun, and people are dissecting it from their own perspectives, and they're maybe looking to go after something. So it's just really important that I think that you know, breaking that down between, you know, the external stuff and it not really being conducive to performance, and just, you know, educating players that if you're going externally looking for stuff to build your confidence, you're in the wrong place, from the perspective that, like, if you are going that route, you have to be aware that you've got to be able to deal with the other side of it as well, and be resilient enough to know if there's something out there. So I think the idea of really, again, back to managing your mindset and really, you know, being internally focused around your process, around your own performance and that, and really having, I think, I'm always saying to players, like, you know, the only review process that you really want to be dialed in on is by your backroom team and your manager, but also your own personal performance review, which I'd always be a big advocate of it, that you have a performance review for yourself, you know, that you have the ability to review your own training session, what went well, what are the areas for further development, what's the actions, and having a practice of that and developing a craft around that builds confidence for you then to know that I understand how to review my own performance. I understand how management and backroom are reviewing it, and I'm pretty good. If we've that done and we've them box ticked, well, whatever other noise is out there is noise, and it's maybe for another purpose.
Yeah, I remember Cian O'Sullivan gave a talk to a team I was involved with coming out of COVID, I think it was 2021, and he said, or you remind me there, he said, preparing for a game the night before, I'd write everything out that I needed and I'd tick it off. I'd close the book. I knew I was ready. And I just remember that just being class. Like even the personal performance review, is that simply just having a notebook and going back to it after every session? Three things I did well, 3 things I need to improve. Is that?
Yeah, and it's again, and I'm always saying to people, even from the sports psychology side of things or performance coach things, like these things, to make these things as simple as you can for yourself, and you just hit it there, and that's exactly what it is. So the review of your own performance, when you look back over your performance, whether it's the video of a game or whether it's the session you're after walking out, and just asking yourself, what went well tonight? Where was I strong? 2 or 3 key things. Then, those AFDs are areas for further development, like what are the things that I wasn't, I didn't execute so well tonight. Okay, so next training session, am I targeting 1 or 2 of those? And what's the action with them? And then that becomes almost the work on for the next night. So it's constantly, and it's amazing if you create your little journal like that. That's a confidence builder as well, because you're looking back and you can see this progress there night after night. So if it's even like, the idea of you're kicking a goal or so on, that's been measured every night. If it's 36 or 46 shots, so on, that you're just looking at, how was I feeling, what went well, so you're actually taking ownership, and I just think it's a really valuable. It's a really valuable tool, and it's always nice to be able to refer back to something as well. Then maybe if you didn't go so well on the weekend, then that you can actually look back and say, well, do you know what? I actually wasn't kicking well for 2 nights in training, or I actually have been struggling on this. So that's actually bled into the performance. Now I understand why. So I think it's a good practice.
I was listening to Joe Brawley's podcast, I'd say about a year or 2 ago, and I forget the name of the Mayo footballer that retired, but they spoke, I think they did an interview in the Examiner, and they gave insight into their journal, and they used the pizza slices, and they would colour in the pizza slices. And Joe Brawley went on a bit of a thing about, geez, where's the fun in this gone? And where's all this? So how do you strike, you said Mick O'Dwyer was great at finding the fun and the lightheartedness. How do you find the fun and the lightheartedness in this high analysing, these reviews? Where's the fun in that?
Where's the fun in it? I think the fun in it is that it's all about how the culture you're in, obviously, within it, and where that fits in. It fits in part of that we're pushing and we want to perform and we want to be better. And that's not a heavy burden in terms of a burden on someone to sit down for 6, 8, 10 minutes afterwards and so on and just review that. I think that's a progressive move. I think it's a skill that actually you can take with you into all areas of your life, in terms of your profession as well, to be able to review yourself and understand that. And there is obviously fun with it as well. You can have a laugh with it without a doubt. Like, I've seen guys going, oh my God, like notes in the journal, what was I at tonight at kicking? Was it the boots? Was it something else? No, clearly, look, I did absolute horror show at work today. Mentally, I just wasn't there. And the fun around it, and some, you see the emojis pop up if someone shows your journal, so there is loads of fun with it, in that as well. And I think, in terms of even the analysis and the review with your team as well, there are loads of opportunities there to have humour. I've had some of the best probably moments and laughs with teams in the analysis or the review, because you have that culture built where we know everybody's been honest, we know everybody's been, we've that ability to be vulnerable, and we've the ability to have a little bit of banter. So there's a lovely balance in that as well. But it does come back, I think, to the culture that you have around the team as well, and that there is a sense of enjoyment of it. Like at the end of the day, particularly with GA, we are an amateur sport, and you have to be cognizant of that always as well.
I was listening to the Indo Sport podcast, and the guys are making the point around kind of similar in terms of driving for performance, but having the personality and the fun. And they were kind of making the comparison of the Paul O'Connell, Ronan O'Gara era to the current era of Irish rugby. And, in the interviews, the lads be a bit more kind of, bit of banter, and the lads now are very regimented. Probably a bit of media training in there as well. But do you think kids are getting too caught up in, you have to be so regimented and this is it and there's no crack? Do you think we're a little bit like that now? Yeah,
I think so. And I think we do need to be careful that we don't rinse the actual... I'm talking from the Gaelic Games perspective because we are amateur, and I suppose amateur again, the essence of it, did I hear? It's a Latin word that's to love, or the love for the love of, and I think we need to be careful within the world of GA that we can lean over into that side of it where maybe we begin to rinse the fun out of things, or to, that idea of paralysis by analysis, so on. So it's a really, really fine balance. And at the end of the day, I think as coaches, we have a duty to build environments that there is humour, that there is laughter, and there is fun in. And look, from a psychology perspective, I've always said, when there is humour, when there is laughter, when there is that sense of kind of a joie de vivre within a group, that's when people find their flow state and so on. So I've yet to see anyone perform well in an environment where they've been, a real repressive environment, and it stagnates and it kills that sense. So you've got to be able to let people flow,
I think I've done nearly 200 podcast episodes by now and plenty of conversations off mic and visiting teams and stuff. And the thing I've learned the most, I think, is, I'd love to get your take on it. High-performing individuals are nearly like entrepreneurs. They can spot their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Have you found that pattern as well?
Yeah, I think, from the high performers that I've been around, without a doubt, they've a great, probably self-awareness in terms of the ability to analyse themselves from the perspective that you just said there. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are the opportunities maybe within my environment that I can capitalise on? And what are the threats to myself maybe as an individual or my performance and so on. So without a doubt, there is an entrepreneurial, because I think when we talk about an entrepreneurial spirit, and I think with a high performer as well, that idea of creativity is really, really important. Even I've worked with players that might have won so much in the game, but they're constantly innovating and they're constantly creating, and they're always looking for ways to push the envelope or push the boundaries, to find new ways to do things, to keep things fresh for themselves. So I think from that perspective, without a doubt.
Shane Walsh had a great line around that. He was saying, you have to practice outside of training to get these kind of different things to bring to training, and then you bring it to a game. He was kind of referencing some of the skill levels he has at the moment. He's just off the charts. Yeah. A player I loved watching was Dermot Connolly, and I know you laced up with him at Vincent's. I took a post from what you shared online. Laced up with Dermot Connolly for 3 years at Vincent's. Apart from his insane natural ability, he was a great team guy and had a great character, very sharp wit. He was an outlier and unquestionably the most gifted of his generation. Took plenty of abuse also. Just give us an insight into Dermot Connolly as a teammate and as a player sharing the pitch with him.
Yeah, incredibly gifted guy. Probably the only other player that I could say that I played with that was in that sort of that vein would be Kieran McDonald. And Dermot was extraordinary. I've often said that, Dermot Connolly to me, he was like Cantona, and I'm a huge Man United fan, so I've often heard stuff about Cantona that, like, what you've seen on a Sunday, if you thought that was good, get a load of what he was doing in training. And I've often been on a pitch with Dermot Connolly in training over in Vincent's, and some of the stuff that he'd pull off left and right, the way he, bending a ball for a pass just without thinking of it, maybe a 50-metre raking pass outside the left, right onto someone's chest as they're moving, without even breaking stride himself at full speed. And you see that type of stuff and you just go, wow. Like that's special, and just his energy as well, and he's carefree. I always thought Dermot had a real sort of just carefree spirit, and I thought again, really, really creative guy, and I could see how, if you're to manage a player like that, you have to find a way to that he feels liberated and that he's not repressed, and those guys can be tricky to manage because within a system that can be so shackled and so dogmatic and so on. But I think that's the art of and the craft of coaching, to understand those type of individuals that are flair, that are highly creative, that have that X factor, and then to be able to challenge them as well, to keep pushing the boundaries. But it was really special, time to in Vincent's to be able to be up close and personal, to see that guy do what he does. And of course then, you're looking at him going on what he'd done with Dublin as well, so incredible. He was just coming at the time, obviously, he was quite young when I was in Vincent's, but you could see all the attributes was there to being a real top performer.
You hinted at a few there. Give us his most outrageous skill at training. What was it?
His moment? Yeah, I think in terms of I've just seen like his ability. I've seen him finish a goal one night that just absolutely blew my mind. He received it. I think it was actually from. He had a brilliant connection with Tomás Quinn Mossy, and he received a ball, a diagonal ball. I remember it. It was up into the top goal in Vincent's, and he received it coming out at full pelt, and he managed to pirouette. And as he was pirouetting, he let fly off the outside of his left, and he just stuck into the stanchion in the top corner. And it was just one of those, it was just a moment where you just went, he actually didn't think for a second about that. That was just locked into the DNA, and, it was an unbelievable picture. It was one of those moments where there's about maybe 5 or 6 seconds where everybody just goes, kind of looks around and go, okay, yeah. Did you see that? Okay, yeah. Let's move on.
Yeah, pity there was no VO to catch that back then.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it was common practice with the likes of Hibs, so probably. But an incredible operator.
Yeah, in terms of those levels of skill, the players you've mentioned, like I had a tennis coach on before. He would have hit with Federer for Wimbledon. He was a hitting partner, and he was talking about the performer. He said some of it's innate, some of it is the performer. For players like Dermot Connolly, when you say it's in their DNA, are you? Like, people say, they're born to do something like that, but he obviously worked on his skills. But there's what's the balance of both?
Look, I think absolutely. There's guys that have a lot of natural ability, but there's a lot of those out there. But then there's the guys that layer it up through the reps, obviously. And I'm always saying with this, there's the idea of your collective training. But your practice, for me, then, is what you do away from. And I suppose just going back to Shane Walsh's point there, which is brilliant. The idea of collective, we train collectively, but honing your craft, that's a practice. That's the art, that you're away with a bag of balls, that you're kicking, that you're honing these particular things away in the kind of, I suppose they call it the shadows or so on, and that you're putting in. And that stuff, and I always found it even as a player myself, that's the real the enjoyable stuff, getting away with that, I often said it's almost like a kind of it's a ritual, or it's ritualistic, there's it's spiritual in its own way, because you're away on your own, you're honing, you get in a flow state, and you're doing this stuff, and that's where you're locked in, and that's where you can bring in, obviously, when you get to the collective, that you can showcase that as well. And I think sometimes, there are people that are very gifted, but sometimes they don't get that. In terms of going up levels, that the idea of refining your art and craft away from the collective practices or collective training is really important.
What allows high performers or high potentials, whatever we're going to call it, what allows them to be at their best?
I think it's the self-awareness piece as well. I think, high performers, any of them that I've met, have a very clear, probably, vision of what really good looks like. For themselves and what the outputs that they're looking for, whether it's an individual or whether it's a team. And I've always seen that they're guys or girls that really, I suppose, take every advantage of the environment that they're in to be the best that they can be. So whether it's the resources or the people around them, that they don't miss opportunities. They're the guy or girl that'll ask that extra question. They're the guy or girl that'll wait behind for that extra little bit of kicking or that extra bit of one-to-one tackling. And they're always really resourceful. And I'm always saying, I think it's a key attribute in a high-performance environment is we look around now and you often hear people saying, I don't have this, I don't have that, this is a blocker and so on. And we say we don't have the resources. But how resourceful are we being? What about resourcefulness? Are you making the best of what's there available to you, and are you getting everything you can out of that in terms of the people, in terms of the infrastructure, the environment, the knowledge, the skill set that's around the place? So whether you're in Santry in a world-class facility or you're in a Portakabin in Sallynoggin, what's around you? Are you absolutely taking everything you can from that? And not to be missing opportunities. And I think from high performers, they're really good at that, and the relentlessness that they bring to that as well, then in terms of self-improvement and that real growth mindset.
We're sitting in a lovely room. If you can hear the noise in the background, that's a lovely fountain. So when we talk about the importance of fulfilling your potential, what stops people from hitting their peak?
Great question. There's probably a multitude of things. I think a lot of it comes down to mindset. I think in terms of just, maybe not understanding the value of that or having a very clear picture of yourself, of what. I'm big on vision, and I think sometimes people don't craft a very clear vision for themselves or for their team, and they don't have that North Star. and they can get blown off track quite easily and quite quickly. And the idea of spending time to craft that and getting real clarity around it, and then understanding that there is a huge amount of persistence that's going to be needed to stay the course, to get to where you need to go, I think, and the work ethic. And I'm always saying there's three probably things in that for me is the idea of you got to show up and be present. All right, so showing up and being present, being where your feet are, that you're connected to your performance. The second one, without a doubt, for me, would be do the work. Yeah, so do the work, show up, be present, do the work. And the third one I'm often thinking is be a positive influence, be a positive and caring influence on the people around you. So I think, those kind of traits, and if you have a clear vision for yourself in terms of that, and then just absolutely, bringing all of yourself to it. And it's probably something I would add in that, and it's probably something that I've noticed maybe over the last, I don't know, maybe it's always been there, but since COVID, I just think, obviously the world has changed. But I think we're now living in what I would call an era of mass distraction. And I just think I would connect this to what I would call a dissipation of energy, that there's so much distraction in society now and so much noise around people that there's a division of focus and concentration. And our eyes are averted from, everything that's going on. So it's getting harder and harder, particularly for young athletes, to be absolutely laser and locked in and maybe, go on that journey in terms of self-actualization.
You're a pro. That was actually my next question, was yesterday, the distraction, because I asked Julianne Russell about this, and she was kind of saying she went down probably a different path to some of her friends, going to Australia, professional athlete, that sort of thing. It's not maybe, your friends doing other things, and it's hard to sometimes be a sheep, not be a sheep and, not follow the pack, particularly I think at the moment. And you say, I'm going to rob the era of mass distraction. What advice do you give a young athlete listening on navigating that?
Yeah, listen, I think for me, awareness is number one. Yeah, and I think in any walk of life, if you have, I'm always saying, awareness precedes action. If you're aware of it first and foremost, you can then action something to deal with it. But a lot of it, you kind of, what's happening maybe with a lot of young people, they kind of blend into the soup, and they just become part of our culture. It's we're kind of, dopamine addicts almost, and there's a high in terms of the scroll or just those distractions, that they're those peak kind of dopamine moments that we're looking for, and we're always on. But I think awareness is number one around the distractions that are there is a big part of it. I think secondly then would be the idea of just probably going back to what I said, the clarity of where you want to go, and being really connected to that, and spending time to unearth, I'm not the big why guy, your why, and it is important, but I think purpose, the idea of purpose, if you feel that you have a purpose and you're on purpose, and Bob said, sort of passion will be flushed by failure, but purpose won't be. If you're on purpose, you may fail, but you're back on and you know where you're going, and you have that sort of a drive shaft that keeps you. But it's really unearthing that and spending time saying, understanding what is my purpose? Why am I doing this? What am I willing to invest? And being very, very clear with that. And then, when the distractions come along, it might avert your eyes for a second or two, but you're like, no, do you know what? I'm not going out tonight. I want to lock in here. I'm willing to make those sacrifices because I'm connected to actually what I want to do, and there's a sense of achievement in that.
Do you think it's a choice or a sacrifice when you make those decisions?
There are always sacrifices in life, but there are choices. And choices, I think we often say, you can lean into negative and say it's a sacrifice, but you get the opportunity to do it as well. So I'd be big about reframing that, some guys or girls, I have to give this up. You get to do that, to do this. I get to do that so I can absolutely shoot the lights out in Croke Park. I get to do that so I can hit a PB or so on. So I think that needs to be reframed, the idea of sacrifices. We live in a world where we're in a pretty good state in terms of what we have in our lives and so on, most people and so on. So it's about those choices without I get the opportunity, to make that. There's an opportunity cost, absolutely. But if you really want to to do something special and fulfill your potential, you have to make the correct choices and line yourself up for success.
There was a line from another podcast, I think it was Chris Williams, or something, and he said what you're looking for is in the work you're not doing. But there's another line I prefer. It's like, choose easy now and down the line you'll choose hard now and down the line you can choose easy. It's kind of the trade-off for it, because if you don't do the work and then you don't reach your potential, yes, you've chose easy now, but down the line with the regrets and what I could have been, that's the hard bit.
It is, yeah, it is. And the idea is probably back to my former point about you have to put in the work. You just have to put in the work. It's as simple as that. You've got to show up. You've got to put in the work, and you've got to make the right decisions and choices around that, and graft. Whether it's an opposition that you're against, or whether it's a 1v1 or a team. I'm always saying to guys and girls, because if you don't do it, you can be damn sure that someone else is doing it somewhere. And when you stand shoulder to shoulder with that guy or girl, when everything is weighed and measured and balanced, whether it's in an All-Ireland final, whether it's in a county final, whether it's on the track, the scales will tip in the favour of those who have, I think, invested most in themselves and done the work.
So what do you say to a young athlete or anyone listening now that wants to sit down and create a vision and they don't know where to start?
I think first and foremost is obviously you have your chosen sport or your discipline, and what's, I suppose it goes back to your setting goals for yourself in terms of that outcome goal that you want to, and that's linked to me really a bit about that vision for yourself. Again, I've said it clearly about just setting, a very, very clear vision for yourself. If you're sitting down and writing that, what does that look like? What does it sound like? What are the behaviours or the actions I need to bring that to life? So just having a very clear vision is a good starting point, and then maybe just working back. I suppose the idea of goal setting, and I think it's really important. People, because of what we talked about distraction and so much and so on, but the idea of you have your vision for yourself, what you want to achieve and attain. That's your kind of outcome goal, and then just bringing that right back down to the brilliant basics. I often call them. What are the daily routines and rituals that you need to do to progress yourself on to that? So the idea of your daily little routines and rituals, whether it's around your gym session, whether it's around your nutrition, around your sleep, your rest and recovery, your mindset, in terms of managing that. I'm often, which is a big part of it, in terms of managing that little internal soundtrack that you have in your head and all that. So those process goals where you're ticking those boxes and you're moving forward, and you're on a little bit of a journey, and to embrace it and to really lean into it. I think I'm a big around the idea of even growth mindset and what that looks like, and seeing that this is an opportunity where you're going to really challenge yourself. But my God, am I going to grow and am I going to be stronger? By virtue of locking into this. Yeah,
I think one of the best insights of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset was Paul Flynn on a podcast. He said in 2015, after winning 4 in a row All-Stars at half forward, Jim Gavin approached him and said, "I want you to go to midfield," and Paul said no. And he said he probably could have catapulted his career again, and he didn't, and he was a huge lesson for him. You did share stuff online. I was kind of doing my research, aka just Googling you earlier, Aston, and one of the things you shared online was stretch goals. What's that?
Yeah, I think it's important for us to really have something that, they often say your reach should exceed your grasp or so on. Something that, not that it's, some people may call it a moonshot goal, but something that is, that is going to really stretch you. That's, just the far side of your comfort zone. Maybe slightly scary, maybe something that you're going to go, I'm not sure if I'm actually capable. But something that you lock in there that it really does focus you from the perspective that, it's not going to be easy. I'm really going to have to work at this. But I think the stretch goal for me, the beauty about it is like the attainment of it is that and it is, as it says, there's such growth in it because it brings you beyond mentally, physically, emotionally, I think, and kind of spiritually. It brings you beyond where you are now. If you can get over that little mountain, and I think then the value of that for yourself is that you're able to navigate a higher peak after that because you've that locked in and you've navigated that. And with that will come obviously huge challenge, but it's challenge I think that's worthwhile. So setting those, I'm a big believer in them. I think I think as humans we need that type of challenge.
So in terms of setting a stretch goal, is it sitting down again, pen and paper, defining the goals, and then having those goals, and then saying, right, give me another, like 20%, push it. Is that pretty much how, so if someone's listening, how they can set a stretch goal, kind of push a certain amount beyond what they think?
I think so, yeah, because I think there's no ceiling on potential, I think, and I'm always saying that, sometimes, to sit down and to say, where am I at? Okay, so I've achieved this. To go to the next level, we have to stretch and push again. And not to be afraid to set that maybe just beyond the boundary of where you think you might be capable. And that's not that you're setting yourself up for failure or so on. You like I think in life we have to lean into things from that perspective in terms of pushing ourselves and wanting to grow and seeking. And I think the best one for a young athlete to couch that is, if you don't make it, think of what you've learned along the way. Think of the challenges that you've encountered, how you've navigated them, how you've found. I love the idea of young people finding workarounds, problem solving to get there. And if you do come short, you've still grown, you've still got something out of it, and so on. And I suppose then it's just the maturity, and this probably comes to, particularly with younger athletes, to have a mature cell around them that can frame those things in the right way. That, okay, you didn't maybe PB or you didn't hit gold, but my God, in terms of, we can see the improvement and the growth you've made as well.
What advice do you give to people listening that might be a mentor or a parent or a friend or a coach of a young athlete with a potential that needs to support them on their journey to becoming their or reaching their potential? Yeah,
I think environment is so important, and the culture that's around the athlete or around the young boy or girl, and that's the culture in the house, the culture in the club, or the culture in the school, or so on. But I think from a parent's perspective, is just, and most parents get this to the point that, like, they're ultra supportive in terms of the care and the nurture and the nature. But obviously they're invested in it, but to be there really as a support in terms of you push your son or daughter, but there's a real balance in it. That they're, at the end of the day, you're obviously a huge emotional connection with them. Your words can really lift them up, or they can really deflate them. So just being really conscious of the language you use around, that it's always supportive, that you yes, you may challenge them, but that it's in a supportive way. So the best environments, whether it's, I think it's at home or whether it's in a high performance environment, is the one where we're saying high support, high challenge. High support, high challenge. And, I'm always saying, listen. As a parent, really listen to your son or daughter, and be that soundboard. And sometimes you don't have to offer an opinion or information, but just be there to listen. You're a landing strip for them when they come through the door in terms of a training session or so on. Be curious. How did it go? Listen, support them, and that's the natural part of being of parenting. But it's you're such an important stakeholder in their development, obviously.
The other thing was, you shared recently, you kind of did a piece on Game On about Rory McIlroy. Now didn't work well from last week at the US Open, but self-mastery, that term really struck a chord with me. Around, you kind of shared a couple of points. Just share it with the listeners in terms of what you kind of put together around Rory McIlroy. Yeah,
I think the whole concept of self-mastery is huge. From the perspective of being able to manage your mindset is a big piece, and being able to, I suppose, deal with the pressures of life, and to be able to navigate challenge, and to be able to manage I think the big one in that probably was about your internal dialogue, particularly from a performance perspective in those high pressure moments, to be able to self-master, to be able to funnel out the noise, as we say, and to remain present and rooted in the moment, and having those, I often say, like little anchors that you go to in those moments. So, and I suppose with self-mastery, I'm always saying, you cannot master yourself if you're not self-aware, or you don't have that EQ to understand your environment, to understand the people that are obviously around you. So that's a big part of I think it's a big part of self-mastery, really, is that idea to be able to manage your internal dialogue in those high pressure moments, as he's obviously he's done in the past and will in the future again, I'm presuming.
You spent a bit of time working with Enda McNulty before you set up your own business, Hexagon Performance. What did you learn from Enda? Someone I need to get on the podcast as well, but working with an individual like that, he's been around such high performers. What was your time with him like?
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. It was a fascinating. Worked in there as a performance coach and a performance lead. Just wonderful to be around the likes of Inda. In particular, I suppose, with a lot of the work we've done across different corporates and different teams, and that to see his impact and his reach in terms of building high performing teams, and the one-to-one, and I suppose the impact on clients as well. So that was a really it was a really informative and a really, I would say, a huge growth period for me as well. And I was leading up a team in there, but it was a great experience actually of managing a team as well, in the performance, health and well-being side of the business. So it was just huge. It was just such a rich environment to be working across daily, because everybody in there, we were all highly challenged. Inda, is really big around, stretching people and challenging people in terms of growing and so on. So it was a brilliant environment, and I learned so much in it.
In terms of the other person you've been around as well is Mick Fitzsimons. I remember after the county final, I spoke to you very briefly, interrupted some of the celebrations. You were saying the software that Mick Fitz runs on, if you could sell that, you'd be worth your weight in gold. What's his software like? Give us an insight into, because I don't think I'll ever get him on the podcast. So give us the insight into Mick Fitzsimons.
If you can crack, you'll crack anything, I can tell you. Look, as I've said, and look, I've said it a number of times over the season. He's a really unique character. He's a brilliant guy in terms of just his leadership that he brings around the team. Again, his mindset, and he's just the idea of that continuous improvement. Like, if you were to put a poster boy up for that idea, Kaizen of continuous improvement, I think Mick Fitz would be that. Just a guy that, training, games, will be looking to challenge himself, will be looking to set new goals, will be looking to really not leave anything on the table when it comes to performance. He's a fascinating mindset. As I've said, like, he's the guy that you'll see maybe after training doing extra one-to-ones on tackling. Will be a guy that, the epitome of a high performer, always working on something, always thinking about something, loves a challenge, and is always looking to push the boundaries on performance. So it's incredible what he's achieved in the game, the way he's done it, his mannerisms, his behaviour, and just his caring nature as well. I've seen him work with younger guys, share information, and a very caring and thoughtful guy, and just a brilliant guy to be around and work with.
Remember, I had Declan Darcy on, and he was saying about Mick, and he talked about the whole conversation about getting the best out of yourself. He originally was a physio and went to do medicine. I think he just epitomises that growth mindset, always striving. Like, is there a point where you've had obviously academic experience, but the practical experience where you have from being around these individuals, how much do you learn from the books versus the characters you've been around?
Look, I'm a firm believer, and it's wonderful what you learn in academia and the institutions you go to. But I've often said that sometimes you learn more from people in these institutions, if you get me, and within the teams, than you'll ever maybe learn in those maybe other learning environments or so on. Huge. I mean, when you see the diligence of some of these, top guys or girls and performers, the rigor that they invest, the human side of it as well, just their spirit in terms of what they bring and their energy, and how the impact that they can have on a group as well. That's stuff that it's very hard to analyse and study it and research it and get an evidence-based paper around it, to suggest about, someone's caring nature or how invested they are in terms of keeping the culture alive and protecting the culture and that. So I think that's a brilliant learning that you see when you see really top performers, the way they go about their business. It's something I think as a coach as well you can take away and say, that's actually how it should be. And it does probably give you the confidence to say, yeah, that is, it's really validating what I always thought, and they have the accolades to prove it.
Has there been a point working with a team or somebody in a high performance coaching aside that kind of made you question what you'd learned and kind of changed your your learning or your perspective on things? Or you said, geez, I hadn't thought of that way, or this is something new that I haven't come across?
Yeah, I think there is probably, I think maybe from even a strength and conditioning kind of perspective, it's and you talk maybe about, maybe I'll use the example maybe of periodization within strength and conditioning. And, if you were to look at the science behind that in terms of choreographing a conditioning program for a team across a year, to actually go out and do that can be quite challenging, because the variables that are at play in terms of a season, that you really have to work a lot on the fly and make decisions in the moment. So your best laid plans around periodization and what I need to get done, and this is the science of it, and this is the research in terms of we'll peak here, we'll overload, supercompensate, and then you're thrown in that you've a league game on a Sunday, you pick up 5 or 6 injuries, you have a threadbare panel, you're out again on the Wednesday, in the Sunday, God, we're meant to be actually getting a block of runs here on the Tuesday, that's no longer, and then you're scratching your head, well, will we not peak when we want to peak? So that's where I would say, in the trenches, there's great learnings in that you really have to work with what you have and make those decisions real time based on what's actually in front of you, as opposed to what was prescribed in the textbook.
Yeah, Shane Hassett said the same about Clare hurling team last year. He was one of the coaches, and I think after the Munster final, they learned from the previous year where they trained and they were very flat in their following game. Whereas they took the full week off, they said, right, we won't talk to you, we won't see you for a week. And he said that made all the difference in the long run with them. So as you say, it's sometimes throwing out the book a little bit and kind of feeling the room and feeling the environment and putting in what's needed.
Yeah, and I think that probably comes back to, we were always saying your coaching eye, and how attuned you are, how well do you know the group, how well do you know the dynamic. And I think the best coaches have got a really clever coaching eye. They've great, what you probably call situational sensing, when they just need to, you're always, as a coach, like a detective, you're always scanning, you're always looking for little red flags, you're always looking for signals that maybe we're tipping over here, we're a little bit flat or so on, so we need to pull back. So it's the idea of, you have so many levers at your disposal as a coach that you really have to pull those in accordance to what you're seeing. So I can well understand why he would say that in terms of, spotting where the energy is. We look flat, a couple of days rest here. The guys need to go off and blow off a little bit of steam or so on, and they need to step away from the game. It's the best thing ever, rather than another session where we come together, we got to strip off and we'll do a light bit of stuff. Yeah, I think your situational sensing is really important as a coach.
Mm-hmm. One of the pieces that came out during the year and The Independent was Alan O'Mara speaking about kind of his experience as New York manager. Very, very honest. I've had Alan on the podcast. It hasn't gone out yet, but we spoke a bit about it. I'm interested in your experience as a coach and not just a manager, just in terms of fulfilling your own cup and being fresh and from your own energy. How do you preserve that when you're in the throes of an elite group?
Yeah, it's really, really important. I probably said it at the outset, the idea of energy management, but the idea of regeneration and recovery, it's so important. We know it's an integral part of any conditioning plan, but from a health and well-being perspective, it's so important that you, across the season, or even your own planning in terms of the planning of your week, that you are blocking off areas that I would just say are for recovery. They're non-negotiable. Yeah, for yourself downtime, for yourself that you're investing in yourself, that you're getting away from the game. And as you said there so beautifully, you're filling up your own cup. I personally, I think, and I've worked across a lot of different industries, probably in corporate as well, I think the idea of intelligent recovery, I think, yeah, it's the missing link in an awful lot of high performance plans. We get the idea of run and burn and more, but we're still struggling, I think, even as humans, to really understand the body and the concept that it needs downtime, it needs to re-energize, it needs to reboot itself. So that's so important, being able to manage that and invest. And we often talk about, you try and put so many supports around the player, from all the things that we've spoken there about their, obviously the information around their nutrition, how important that is as a manager, as a coach, your fueling strategy for you. If you're to be on the go Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, what is the quality of your own fuel and nutrition you're taking in? That'll significantly impact your energy levels. What's the quality of your sleep? Huge. We know that the body, recovers at a cellular level at a deep cellular level through sleep. And, that's so important, particularly because you have a mental load of making key decisions and being able to see things, and you're probably having 25, 30 conversations per week with people as well. So all of that, and your own fitness as well, your physical health and movement is really, really important. So it's about really, you must be prudent around building that scaffolding of your own health and well-being around you, making sure that that's really robust, because you will be tested throughout a season. Energy or coaching is a game of energy, and you must have it. And your players and your people around you will notice very quickly, and they'll pick up on it if your energy is low. And you really have to be setting the tone and setting the bar when you get into training and so on.
Alan gave a great line. He said, I didn't realise, I could be paraphrasing now, I didn't realise delegating the task wasn't delegating the worry. And when we talk about delegation and building a management team, what do you look for in when you're bringing a management team together? Yeah,
it's something that you have to, I think long and hard of. The dynamic is really, really important, and the chemistry that's there between a group is really, really important. I've worked in some settings where, often with maybe throughout the years, with managers, where sometimes they end up burning off more energy trying to manage their back room than they do actually managing the team. So I think it's an area that you have to give a lot of thought to in terms of the skill sets, the skill sets that are required, but the personalities and the chemistry, and will it fit and blend together, and will you be able to work with one another, and are they people you can, obviously the big thing is trust, and that you be able, that you build that deep connection, and that you have a sense that I can really trust this person, we can build deep connections with that. So I think that's a really, really important piece. It's a piece that, and I know sometimes, maybe in different management circles, jobs come up and people rush that, and I need to get a backroom team together, and it is a bit frenetic, and you're looking in the phone book and so on. But I think it's a piece that you have to be really, really prudent with. It's like any recruitment, I think, in any industry. You'll save yourself a lot of headaches if you get the right people, and you have to take time on that, and you have to understand the balance and the dynamic that you're looking for that to work, because you're going to basically be living in each other's pockets for, which you would hope maybe 13 months if you're going to go to an All-Ireland. So that's really important. Yeah.
What's the most important role that you look for when you're the manager? That maybe, everyone talks about the coach and the strength and conditioning and the physio, but is there anything that is so crucial to a team and to a manager that we don't know about from a management, from the outside of a group? Well,
I'd be big about the collective. I think in terms of the strengths of everybody and everybody playing their part, I think that's a huge part of it. So for me, it's about that the harmony among that group, that everybody knows their role, knows their lane, and that they're executing within that. So I don't. For me, often someone might say if it's an inter-county, the chairman is really important, or so on, or there's a particular stakeholder. But I would see always I'd be about the collective harmony of the group, the collective synergy, the collective connection within your backroom, and that for me that's key, because if you're leaning on just the one individual to keep the show on the road, or I can just go to, I would like to think that at that level there should be a real shared sense of purpose and a shared sense of identity, and that there's a shared sense of the workload as well, and that you can, in terms of the delegation, as Alan so well put it, that you don't delegate the worry. But I think if you really trust your people, you really have to give them their head, and that they're really bought in, or they're dialed in on their own brief.
What's the biggest challenge then as a manager currently in Gaelic games at club or county level?
The biggest challenge, I think there's a huge challenge in terms of the volume of probably stuff that you have to get through in a given week, in terms of, the brief is growing, I think, every year. There's more pressure coming with it. There's more eyes on you. There's a lot more scrutiny. There's a huge, I think, mental health challenge around that. I think the expectation that's there in a lot of different environments to be successful, and the pressure that comes with that, I think it's a huge challenge. Going back to what we probably spoke, particularly from a GA perspective, it's an amateur game still. It's obviously everything you do inside of it is at a professional level. You're dealing with professionals. But again, it is at an amateur level. So, I think the scrutiny and maybe some of the negativity that can come from external, whether it's platforms, whether it's out of your control and so on, it's that's a challenge to manage that and manage yourself over a season with that. So I do think that's quite challenging.
What do people talk about the hours that goes into management? What do you spend your most time doing when you're a manager of an elite team?
I think obviously there's so much that you're doing from an analysis perspective, I think, in terms of opposition analysis of your own game, cutting and chopping and that. You'd like to think that you'd have hands on that. There's a lot of time spent in that in terms of the review. I think chopping stuff up and working with the people that are doing that. Then there's obviously the player piece. I'm a big believer in those conversations, those small conversations that are needed weekly with players. Whether you have a schedule that you're rotating, that you're definitely having one-on-ones weekly, that maybe you're rotating them 5 every different week, and I would say one-on-ones, maybe it's just a coffee and a phone call or something like that you're understanding where all your guys and girls are, you're understanding their challenges, and that you're not losing connection. That's really, really important, and that you're making time for everyone. And in particular for maybe guys or girls as well that feel maybe they didn't make a squad or that they're on the fringes, and that there's a big piece of work in that as well. I think in terms of making sure that everybody is still connected and they feel valued and they feel supported and so on as well. So there's that, and then obviously there's as you go upstream, the different stakeholders in terms of whether it's county board or whether it's club officials, and that there's a connection piece there as well. And then you have obviously plugged in with your strength and conditioning coaches as well, and that. So it's managing all those relationships and stakeholders is really, really important.
What's the biggest misconception about Gaelic game managers at the moment?
The biggest misconception, I often sit back maybe and you say, just if I was to look in on a Sunday at a game, just with a cold pair of eyes, and I didn't understand what goes on backstage, that I would be at the perception, that these guys, they rock up, they train, they come out, and we get to view them and we get to critique their performance. But, maybe if you understood that maybe that manager has picked a team, has managed this all week and all over the months, he's built relationships with these players, he's probably invested a huge amount of time in them, he probably has gone above and beyond for them, he probably has been involved in maybe some of their professional decisions at work. They've lent on him as a mentor. He may have helped them through a tricky period in a relationship with a girlfriend or a boyfriend or so on, and that he's really invested in them, and that he's done all this. And sometimes people forget that as a manager, as a coach, it's not just about the X and O's. It's the relationship piece. It's how you're nurturing people. It's how you're educating people, and the culture that you're trying to develop around them so that they can grow as well. So sometimes I just wonder, from a supporter's perspective, maybe when you're looking, would you be as quick to maybe be so tough on someone if they had a loss or so on? I know it's a cutthroat sport, is cutthroat, and it's a results-driven business, but just I think maybe in the spirit of the game to understand the complexities of managing a team and what actually goes into it outside of the X and O's.
Yeah. In terms of that perception then of when we look in on match day and you want your players to be the best they can be on the pitch, how do you make sure you're the best you can be on the sideline during the cauldron that is a big game?
Yeah, it's back to really, again, the managing self piece, all right? I'm always saying our leading self probably is a better term. There's the idea of, if you want to be in a leadership role, lead self, to be able to lead team, to be able to lead an organisation. So coming back to yourself, how do you lead yourself? You've got to look at your week in terms of the things we spoke about there. What do I need to put in place over the week so I am at my absolute zenith on Sunday between 3 and 5? And it goes back to the brilliant basics and the key pillars of your health and well-being that you would put around your players. That you have enough rest, you're sleeping well, you're eating well, you're recovering well, you're getting your own movement in, you're managing your mindset, that you're clear, that you have got significant blocks of rest and recovery, and all of those in. The same things I would say, a lot of them, in terms of that you would expect of your players. You must be investing in them yourself as well. And then that you have your detail done for match day, your scenario planning, the what ifs, and that you're obviously on top of your brief, and that you have your homework done.
Eamon Devlin was on the podcast a while ago. He does a lot of work with halftime talks, and he named his company Minute 9 because on average managers speak for 9 minutes at halftime. Give us your most memorable halftime experience as a player or a coach.
I think as a player, my most memorable one would be, it's actually quite a funny one, but it's actually with Mick O'Dwyer. I just thought we went up to Armagh in a game. We were up in Armagh in a game, and it was an incredible game. We probably, Wicklow versus Armagh. Wicklow probably shouldn't have had a prayer. We drew the game, went extra time and so on. But I know there was a moment in that at half time. We knew we were right in it, but Miko, just watching him in the dressing room, how passionate he was, the levels he was going to really get us. He could sense something was about to happen here. He'd obviously been around the game long enough. There's an opportunity here. And one of those moments just when we're leaving the dressing room, like where he drew a shoe on the table. And I just thought, like, after all that man has done, and after all that man has seen, and after all the All-Irelands that he's won, as a player, as a coach, to see that passion and that desire and that burning intensity still there, I just thought that was a real moment as a player. I think was just, it was incredible.
Anything from manager's perspective with Cuala, was there anything that during the 3 years that you did at halftime that you just sticks out to yourself?
Yeah, I think we've been pretty level probably over it all. I suppose we would have prided ourselves probably our half times where we probably had it down to a pretty nice, like, calm system where we reviewed stuff, and there wasn't they weren't certainly big emotives. Dressing rooms at half times was very cool. It was clean. It was calculated enough. But I think there were moments. I suppose even it was a special moment. I think the half time maybe in the All-Ireland. The All-Ireland Club final, I suppose we came in, we were 13 points up or whatever, significant, and that's probably one that'll stay with me for a while. Just the sense of kind of calmness that was there, the realisation maybe that we're on the brink of something here, but just looking around at guys and to see the level of composure that they had shown in the first half and the execution of what we had spoke about, and what we had probably drilled, and the detail, to see that come to fruition in the first half, and then to sit maybe and just, in that kind of calm, cold way at half time. Now, I know we came under serious pressure in the second half, and I often think at half time, you're always thinking, should we have done more, should have been more emotive, but I don't think, I just think sometimes there can be a lot of energy wasted at half time, and that half time will probably live long in my memory as well, because obviously it's such a special day. There was so much going on in Croke Park that day as well. Nafina had been on the pitch beforehand, and you're going out setting up a warm-up and they're celebrating their success. So mentally it was quite taxing, and you had Molly Malone sweeping into the dressing room. You could hear they're after winning and trying to keep everybody focused. But I just thought the halftime in that particular one, there was a great sense of calmness. There was a great sense of realisation that, like, we're in a good space here.
Yeah, with the county final, I remember probably a bit harshly after the game I asked what's next, and I think the journalists beside me kind of started laughing. But how do you manage a team and the noise around the club, which I mean in a very positive light, where you've got their first senior football county title, and they had obviously been there with the hurling, but I remember the scenes in Parnell Park, it was unbelievable. Then you're into Leinster, then you win Leinster, then you're into the All-Ireland, and then you win the All-Ireland. Just the peaks and troughs, particularly even Christmas, just managing, because that's a very unique place to be in Gaelic games. Very few people go through it because there's so few teams in that competition. Yeah,
it is a challenge, and when you get over the first hurdle, obviously winning Dublin, as you rightly said there's a huge amount of a release of emotion. There's a lot of clamour. It's all positive, and it's you really want players to absorb that and to spend time with their families and to observe what it means to people and very much dial into the emotion of it. It's a huge part of it, and I would be big on that in terms of giving guys that time and that space to really to experience that because it was obviously a breakthrough year, but those type of experiences in life don't come around that often either. So it's very much giving people time and space to observe, absorb, and to really draw as much as they can from it in every aspect, mentally and emotionally, and even again, the spiritual side of it, that it really does fire up your purpose and so on. So that's one part of it. But then it's very much coming back and reframing, and reframing the next journey and the next step and the new vision. Again, about being able to sit down and articulate where are we going next? Okay, what's the next peak? What does that look like? What's it going to take? And then what are, from probably a setup or a management perspective, what's the expectation now? What is the expectation I have, or we have as a backroom of you guys, the way you carry yourself, the diligence that you show, the hunger that you show, the desire that you show. We're looking for more now, because the higher you go, the more you need to give, because you're looking at better opposition. So it's about framing that in the right way, I think, in terms of challenging and setting the bar. And then I've always said, which I think is a really important part of it, your senior leaders in the group are really key in terms of that as well. We had quite a mixed group, obviously, with a lot of younger guys coming who are incredible characters, incredible energy, incredible enthusiasm, and then you have the older guys that, your cultural architects, for want of a better word, that have been there before, that have seen it all before, and that understand if you want to go again and hit the next peak, that it's back to brass tacks, and we've got to find a ways to challenge ourselves again.
At what point did you say we can win the All-Ireland?
Are you ever sure? I think a huge game I thought for us was the Naas game. I thought it was an unbelievable game. It was an unbelievable game to be involved in. It was an unbelievable challenge. And I thought that night, coming out of there, coming out of Newbridge, I just felt in my bones, I think, that was the right game. That was the right challenge. We could do a lot of stuff here if we keep on this vein and we keep pushing and driving. We can do this.
Teams, when they have success, speak about the moments and the work that went in. Obviously, you won the All-Ireland on the day of the All-Ireland, but in a figurative sense or kind of question, where do you feel you won the All-Ireland?
I think, like any team, I think we won it on the training ground. I think we won it on the dark mornings and the late evenings, and in the analysis room and in the gym, and that I think it's just spread across the workload, the quality of the workload, the volume, our culture, our togetherness, the build that the journey we'd gone on. I think it was spread over that. It was spread over that kind of continuum and across those areas. I don't think you could probably pull out any one thing. I think it was a collection of all those moments from all those sessions, review sessions probably, training sessions, team sessions, bonding sessions, whether it was, out in Shankill, in the water or wherever it was that we went to. It was all those moments coming together that it takes.
In terms of your own personal aspirations, I know you stepped away from Cuala for plenty of different reasons. For management, is it something you do again? Do you have any personal aspirations around it all, or?
Currently, I suppose back to our former point, I'm really enjoying my downtime now, my block. I think it was important for me in terms of to re-energise and refocus. I love coaching. I'm a coach by nature. I get a great buzz out of it. I find it energises me, and I get a great sense of purpose of it. And I love working with players and seeing them develop. I probably get more out of that, seeing guys fulfil their potential. That's for me, that's what it's all about. To see maybe a guy that somebody thought, he's not going to make it, or you'll never win a senior championship with him, and to see then maybe that guy turn up and be a man of the match in a county final or so on, and just to say, he gets to experience that and we get to experience that together. So I'm really passionate about coaching. I'm really passionate about developing and try to help people maximise their potential. And I love Gaelic games. I've been at it since I was 4, and I'm just so passionate about it. It's such a big part of my life and that. So who knows? Yeah, I'm really enjoying my time at the moment. And I said I think it's important for me to re-energise and recover. And who knows what comes down the line then.
You mentioned you've been involved in sports since you were 4 years of age. What's the biggest lesson you've learned from it?
Oh God, it's a brilliant question. There's so many lessons, so many lessons I've learned from it. I think the biggest one really that I've taken away from it is just the resilience. Yeah, the resilience that's needed, and the resilience that I probably have built mentally, and again you'd say maybe emotionally, through going through all of those, probably different championships, different teams with Sigerson, club, inter-county, then on into management and that. So I think it's just the resilience that you build up, I think, is the big part, and that you're able to manage yourself. But the values that probably you come away from it, understanding the idea of, as I spoke about, work ethic, discipline, connection, teamwork, all of those things that, again, when you're younger, they're redundant on you. But it's only when you maybe at the latter end of your career, you think back over all the teams you've played on, all the coaches that you've worked under, and what you've built, all maybe the freezing cold mornings that you would have been easier to lie in bed, that you actually decided I'm going out training, or the beach runs that you hit, maybe I live beside the beach at home, that big into physical fitness when I was young, and going down there, training on your own, and having a sense of purpose and a sense of duty that you wanted to be the best because you were pulling on the club jersey on Sunday and that. So I've learned so much from it, like all of those things. And it has a profound impact, I think, on your character. You build great character as well, which is a huge thing that serves you well when you hit those road bumps and potholes in different stages of your life, be it in relationships, or be it at work or professionally or so on. You remember those tougher moments, and and it helps you navigate, I think, what's coming down the line as well.
Speaking of learning, I'd love a book or a podcast recommendation.
Book or a podcast recommendation?
Obviously, after you listen to every single episode.
Yeah, I have a few to go. Let's just say that. I have a few to go. I think a podcast for me. I do love the High Performance Podcast, I have to say. It's really good. There's been some great stuff in it over the years. And I love the way the guys go about it, and the characters they've on. I think there's so much learning in it from that perspective.
Who was your favourite guest out of interest?
My favourite guest, the most interesting I found on it, and probably a lot of people would say, I just thought the sea change in Johnny Wilkinson was incredible, I thought.
It's like Yoda or something. He was just real deep about everything. It was very interesting.
Absolutely. And just again, I suppose the fascination of the journey that he came on, where he started to where he is now, in terms of the evolution of his psychology, the evolution of his life, his practices. The journey he's been on has been fascinating. When you think of what he's experienced as a sports person, the pressure he put on himself, almost to the point of breaking, to then come through that and understand, to have this kind of profound now understanding of life, and of what success means now, and the clarity that he has around it. And I would say the courage that he has in terms of articulating that and being very expressive of it, and really showcasing it and living it.
Yeah, very valid point. Any books come to mind?
An avid reader. Books that come to mind, I suppose I'm always looking at the different ones. I do love that one by Carol Dweck, Grow Up Mindset book. I think it's a really good book. It's a very simple book, but I think it's a brilliant book, and I would advocate it for any young person to get their hands on. Champions Mindset, the one by Dr. Bob Rotella, really good one as well. So there are huge amounts. I'm an avid reader, but those type of ones really spring to mind. There's another one actually which I always
I love and I often reference is there's a book, Tom Crean, The Unsung Hero. He's a big character that over the years I've been fascinated by his journey. He's obviously the polar explorer, and Tom Crean, the polar explorer, a guy that won an Albert Medal for bravery through those those polar explorations that he'd gone on with Shackleton and Scott and so on. And the book is titled Unsung Hero, and it's just incredible what he'd done. And we often talk about being a team player. I just think he's one of the greatest advocates or examples of being a world-class team player. When you see the likes of Shackleton and Scott and these guys, they kept going back to him to bring him on these escapades because of his teamwork, because of his character and his caring nature. And it's just, I just think he really is an unsung hero, an Irish unsung hero.
I've heard kind of the other books, never heard of that one, so I'll have to check it out. Conscious of time, I'm going to fly through the sideline 7. Same 7 questions at the end of every episode. Question 1, Austin, what's your favourite quote? I get the sense you're a quotes man anyway.
Look, I suppose in my profession, I've seen more of them probably painted on walls, and you're in different organisations and you're in different gyms and that. But there are one or two definitely that I would lean into. I think there was one that probably from when I was young. Obviously, I grew up in an agricultural background on a family farm. I had a great love for Patrick Kavanagh in terms of his poetry and that, and I always loved reading his stuff. And there was a small little passage in a poem he had, and it was called, I think it was To the Man After the Harrow, and there was I think it was 4 lines in it, and it was forget the men on Brady's Hill, forget what Brady's boy might say, for destiny will not fulfill unless you let the harrow play. And I just thought it was, when I was young, it sums up the idea of, if you really want to succeed in life, you really have to chart your own destiny, and you cannot let others' opinions maybe influence you and take away, your kind of purpose. And I suppose there's some piece in that was, not it was a bit of a kind of a rebel, but the idea again of really trusting your stuff and being in the moment and really going for it. And I suppose, I loved it from the point of view because probably from a rural context, there's often the kind of, what do the neighbours think? And I just thought that summed that up beautifully. The other one was, and it's in very much the same vein, but it probably came later in life, was the idea of, I'm the master of my fate, I'm the captain of my soul. So I just, that one from Evictus, and again it's probably in the similar theme in terms of the idea of your own agency to determine your own outcome in life and to control the controllables and to trust your stuff.
Amazing, I love that line. Question 2, best sporting event you've been to. Pick one that as a fan and one you've been involved in.
Oh God, one that I've been involved in without a doubt has to be an All-Ireland final. The idea of just, I suppose, getting to experience and running out the tunnel in the Hogan, that wall of colour and sound that comes at you on All-Ireland final day, the noise, just the energy in the stadium. It's kind of something, I'm not sure, I've never really asked anyone else, but it's one of those ones that I think it kind of lives in your system, in your bones. You often find yourself going back there. So as a player, I was lucky enough to get to experience those 2 days in 2004 and 2006, which was incredible. And it'll live long, and those will live long in the memory in terms of just that sense of occasion. I think as a fan, would it be very boring to say I love going back to All-Ireland finals?
No, not at all. Yeah, it's best.
I get such a sense of giddy anticipation the morning of an Ireland final, inter-county. Like I rarely miss them. I just love getting in there, the sense of anticipation around them, just watching. Even coming up Jones's Road, the clamour, the excitement, the energy, the buzz. It's just a wonderful day, and to be there, sit and watch, a team at the end when those gold streamers come down, and just the sense of occasion and joy of, it's incredible, to see it.
I love the way you said you've rarely missed one. You must be good connections then, tickets-wise. I'll be on to you now.
I thought I could see the cogs turning all right when I said that. I was like, she's gonna hit me with something here now. I know. I'll keep you in mind. I have a few contacts. I won't lie now.
Question 3, biggest setback or challenge so far in your career, and how did you react to it?
Biggest setback or challenge, I think. There's been a number. Look, all of us that has been through, I suppose, sporting here have had a number of significant challenges. I had a huge one probably about maybe, I'd say 10 years ago or so. From a playing perspective, I was probably just finishing up my inter-county career, and I got an eye injury that had a big impact on me. I remember at the time, I probably had in my mindset that I was going to go back home and play with my club the last number of years, because I had obviously transferred up to Dublin and I was in Wicklow. And I remember picked up a nasty eye injury at the time, which ended up sort of going on, and I ended up being out of work for a good while with it. And I was kind of told that I had a couple of little different surgeries on it and that, and I potentially was told then that, like, I don't think you should play sport, or that, obviously a field sport. Yeah, so that kind of derailed me probably for a little bit. But I remember, my plan was to go home and play with my club and finish up my club career. And that was always in the back of my mind. So I suppose, to maybe the better judgment of other people, I decided, like, no, I'm still actually I'm gonna do this, like. So I was training away, I remember, on my own, trying, keeping the body relatively fit and so on. And I probably had to find a way to play, given, the nature of the injury I had at the time. And the idea, I suppose, just the challenge of that, maybe of getting back out there and playing at club level, which probably nobody actually knew in terms of the challenges that was, to get ready to go back and do that. And that was a big challenge, and I probably had to find a lot within myself, within my mindset, to find probably the courage and to really probably had to change my game as well to an extent around that as well. But I was so lucky to get the opportunity to go back with my club and played. We won a county junior final, and we went on to win a Connacht junior final. And I was heavily involved in the coaching aspect of that as well, in terms of maybe the strength and conditioning element that we put in place at the time and that. So that was a really fruitful period. Like, so it was, that was a really, I suppose it was a challenge, but it was one again that I really decided, I suppose just it was, to really, burn in on some mental strength to really do that.
I think Conor Myler, and I'm someone as well that went through quite a big injury, and again, I wasn't there, but I can feel those lonely nights and those decisions. But Conor Myler articulated beautifully post-game. I don't know how he put the words together after the game about the journey that it is being with a grueling injury, particularly in a team sport. It's a very lonely place, so I can.
It is, and it's very challenging, and I'm always cognizant when I'm coaching now of players that are injured, in terms of keeping them really connected to the group and making sure they have the supports as well, because a lot of it's solitary. You're doing a lot of stuff on your own and so on, and you do need those support systems in place to help people. And it's just to keep going, to keep seeing that light at the end of the tunnel, that you're going to get that opportunity as well, and that it's going to be worthwhile.
On the flip side then, a much more positive light, your biggest achievement on or off the pitch?
I think probably biggest achievement on the pitch, probably, I would have to say, probably getting across the line with Cuala this year in the All-Ireland final. I think, it was just, in terms of probably what went into it, probably my first real, which you would say, really serious coaching role, or management role, to be able to experience that at that level, and to work with the quality and the calibre of players that I did get to work with, and also I suppose the younger guys I've there in terms of the development of that. That definitely, I think, maybe in terms of on pitch, I think we can still class that as on pitch. I was on pitch. The off-pitch one, I think probably becoming a father, becoming a dad. I'm not sure if we can class it as an achievement.
Plenty of guests have said it the same.
Yeah. I think just, it's a whole different other challenge. It just, your world is changed, and I suppose the sense of responsibility that comes with it, and that your day really is framed from that perspective, you know, in terms of what you need to do to support this little human, and how you need to change and shape your life. And, you know, as a sports person, growing up, you're very attuned to being very selfish. And it's about me, and it's about, you know, I got to put the and so on. So I think when you become a parent or a father or a mother, you know, that changes completely. It's now your sole focus is that, and it just changes the whole dynamic of your life, and beautifully so as well. So I think that's, I'm not sure if it's achievement, but it's certainly it's certainly a milestone.
Brilliant. Question 6, who is your dream dinner guest and why? And on the topic, I think I've managed to find where I would have my dream dinner party in this room in the Continental.
It would suffice, it would suffice.
Who would make it then on your list?
My dream dinner guest, there's probably a number of them, but do you know what? I'd have to say there's a guy called Martin Sheridan, and not a lot, again, maybe not a lot of people will know him, but he's a Mayo man. He's one of Ireland's greatest people ever, and he came from a little village called Bohola in Mayo, and he has won 5 gold medals across 2 different Olympics, 3 silver, I think, and a bronze thrown in there at discus and the Greek discus. I think it was across 2 different Olympics. I think one was London, and I think the other one was in Greece. But he's a guy that came from a very, very small rural background in Mayo. Immigrated, I think, at the age of 18. Ended up in the New York Police Department. I think he actually went on to become a detective and was bodyguard for the Lord Mayor of New York at one stage. He died quite young, but a guy like that, I just think, would be brilliant if you could go back and sit down with him and talk to him in terms of what he achieved, how he done it, what was the mindset at the time, what was the training like. I suppose you're just fascinated by these people. I suppose he's a Mayo man as well. I don't know if we have any, too many more Olympians, but you don't often hear of him. But I remember growing up hearing the story, and I got kind of fascinated by it. To think that a young guy from a rural village in Mayo could go on the world stage and achieve that type of success. A very humble guy by all accounts, and so on. Died actually, I think, quite young, maybe before he was 40. I think he got pneumonia or so on. But just an incredible character, and someone that you'd love to sit down and really, spend an hour with and cut a steak with and just see what was it all, where was it all at in 1904 and 1906 and that in terms of preparation and so on.
Amazing. I never heard of him, so I'll have to look.
Yeah, incredible story.
Amazing. Question 7, if your life was a book, and judging by your notebook, maybe someday it will be, what chapter would this be called?
Oh God, embracing the dad body, maybe. Would that be? I don't get to train as much as I'd like to know, because so I'm definitely struggling. But I think I think just maybe becoming a dad or embracing in that it's a significant shift, I think, actually, and it's a good, I think, kind of a reorientation of my life as well.
Yeah, very good. Well, Austin, look, thanks a million for your time. If anyone's listening that wants to reach out, where is the best place to do that? Yeah,
it's at www.hexagonperformance.ie. Our email address is austin@hexagonperformance.ie, and always open to a mail or a phone call if there's ever anybody that needs support in terms of performance coaching, be it individual or team. More than happy to have that conversation.
Brilliant. Austin, thanks again.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time.